Hi, it's Pastor Steve in beautiful Visalia, California. It is a gorgeous day here, going to be in the low 100s. We're living in strange times. In Sheridan, Wyoming yesterday, it was much hotter than it was in Visalia, California. And friends, that does not happen very often. Stay cool wherever you are. Thank you for joining Happy Thoughts. Going to talk relatively rapidly. I did a previous version of this particular talk and it lasted 22 minutes. That's too long. So here we go. We live in a world that is horribly divided right now. And existing in that world means that if you turn on the nightly news, whoever you watch, Fox or CNN or something in between, what you hear is inflammatory rhetoric, demeaning and characterizing opposite viewpoints in such a way that they are made to seem absurd and evil. You are assured every time you watch the news or read articles from the same types of folks that the world is going to hell if we don't completely eradicate and stop the other side because they're evil and wrong. So this series of what is an exploration of how I believe Christians should be reacting and acting in those situations. Number one, let's confess. An angry Christian leader who takes the authority that is given them by the church into the pulpit and derides and demeans and dismisses others as evil and less than human and demeans them and stereotypes them in horrible ways. They are not ever following the teachings of Jesus Christ, who is the center of the Christian faith. Never, because he never acted that way. He occasionally, towards the end of his life, towards the beginning of his passion, called out the politicians for some things, but he called out the politicians, not the sinners in society. The fundamental truth of behavior and internal attitude that Jesus taught is this: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Here's how that operates for me as a Christian leader, and I hope will be operative for you too. I have been demeaned. I have been lied about. I have been mischaracterized. I have been dismissed. I have been gossiped about. I have had people write poison pen letters and send them to other folks, right? I have been treated the way that the leadership of the different sides of the main issues in our society treat each other, and I want nothing to do with that. I don't want to follow a leader who does that. I don't want to follow somebody who plays those kind of games and is that shallow and that far away from the teachings of Christ. And I don't care if that person is a bishop in the church or holds the biggest pulpit in the United States. Don't care. It's obvious to me that that attitude is not what Christ calls for. Here's what Christ asks us to do: treat others like we want to be treated. So when I have been treated that way, when people have treated me in evil and horrible and wicked ways, it has caused me to determine, especially in these issues that divide our nation and our church, to act and react differently. So when I hear things that make me say, what? I try to will myself not to react, not to voice an opinion based on an initial reaction when my worldview or my ideas are threatened. Here's what I have tried to do over the last several years. I assign myself the project of researching why somebody would say something that seems so outlandish to me. What gives rise to a good human being, or at least a fallen human being, redeemable like myself, to saying things that are unbelievable and crazy to me? And there's no shortage of those kind of statements and those kinds of ideas. And what I've discovered is when I do that, when I take the time to research and get beyond the rhetoric and start looking at the facts and the historical happenings and the mindsets that drive some of the end game nonsense that the news loves because it causes us to be inflamed and then to watch more of what inflames us. When I do that, I end up understanding I don't necessarily disagree as much as I thought I disagreed. I disagree with the conclusion. I disagree with the proposed action a lot of times, right? Because those things are driven by political leverage and they're just crazy. But I do understand, well, okay, there's more truth to that position or that view than I had known before. It doesn't give me automatic answers. I don't know what to do about a lot of the things that divide us. I just don't. But I do know that I have more peace when I take the time to listen and to do my own research, listening to other voices that I disagree with on the surface level, going deeper and finding out what drives their passion, what drives their anger, what are they actually expressing. When you do that, you can still disagree with the end result of their process, right, with what's being proposed. You can even see it for how absurd it is. Again, I started this particular session by confessing a lot of Christianity is just absurd and hateful, and it just it hurts my heart to see Christian leaders trying to feast on the fears and the anger of their people. So I'm going to illustrate as quickly as I can today using just a simple illustration of the Black Lives Matter movement in a particular way. So the Black Lives Matter movement, for many of us, myself included, first kind of exploded into our consciousness when we had riots. We had the killing of George by the police officer that leaned on his neck, and that just exploded into a summer of horrific events and marches. I was very confused. I thought at first, well, the issue is police conduct, and we should be addressing that. So why does it bleed into all the rest of the stuff? Confused and unhappy with what I was seeing on the TV, and not at all impressed with occupying whole areas of some of our major cities. Those kind of things distressed me. But in my distress, I decided I don't need to be telling anybody that I think the people who do that are horrible or evil or going to, they're what's wrong with our country. What I need to do is investigate what in the world's going on here. Why are people so inflamed about it? Oh my goodness. So I put aside all of the things that I kind of naturally matched up with my worldview, and I began to study like a research paper, right? What historical things, what truths are driving the kind of passion that I saw in the Black Lives Matter. And here's the deal. In that research, I came across something that for me was transformative, where it didn't make me think that rioting and those kind of things are acceptable at all. It didn't make me agree with the conclusions of Black Lives Matter on a lot of their proposals for how to right the wrongs. But it did make me able to say, yeah, I'm not positive if I were in the same situation that I would be a lot calmer. Here's what I discovered. And maybe I should have known this before, but frankly, I didn't. One of the issues is the disparity of wealth and opportunity in our nation. A lot of what Black Lives Matter is talking about is that disparity. And the comeback from the other side of the issue is, well, we worked hard, and so we earned what we have. And there is a lot of truth to that for a lot of people. Very few folks were just handed by anybody a boatload of money. Most people consider themselves to be self-made at some level, even if they started with some advantage. But when you really study about what is historically being said, you come on some really difficult things. Redlining for me was the issue that really turned the tide in my heart attitude and in my willingness to listen. Redlining came from the Jim Crow South, which was just evil expressed politically. And in the Jim Crow South and in the years that followed, even when Jim Crow was overturned a little bit, politicians, white politicians in the South and in many areas of the country, they divided up the zones in their cities and in their areas, isolating and creating intentionally black ghettos. And they did it in such a way that the blacks votes were split. Not only that, but the way that permits were issued for building or for commerce, they were intentionally written so that black people couldn't take a step forward, even with tremendously hard work. When blacks solved that problem, like they did in Oklahoma, by really forming their own small towns, cities, and developing their own economic model, people came in and burned it down, right? The effect of that is this. If you're white, you live in a world where whites for generations have been able to accumulate wealth in this way, by ownership of land and buildings and by ownership of businesses. And that accumulated wealth of one generation gets passed down in one way or another to the next generation, giving them a big head start on being able to further the wealth. That's how wealth is created and sustained. Now, in my personal life, Was raised in a very, very poor environment. My father died young, and my mother was a minimum wage earner, and there were 5 kids to take care of. So my personal story is that I'm white, and I had to work very, very hard to climb out of that poverty, as did my siblings. But here's the deal. Even in that situation, my mother owned her home, right? My father, when he was alive, and he didn't inherit wealth either, but he was able to purchase land for a ranch and for a home. And because of insurance policies, my mom owned that home. And so even though we were minimum wage family with all those kids, home ownership, right? The home was paid for by the insurance policy, was a big deal. Now, if you're Black, there's been very little accumulation of wealth, a little bit here, a little bit there, but by and large, systematically, Blacks have been oppressed in our country's history from being able to accumulate wealth. Not only actual wealth that gets transferred through wills, but they have come up against an even more insidious system, which denies them the ability to learn how to accrue or build wealth from those who have done it. They don't have mentors in the Black community because the Black community has been oppressed and systematically kept from building wealth through land ownership and through entrepreneurship at a level that's frankly astonishing and heartbreaking. So that's what my research revealed to me. It doesn't change the fact that I'm not impressed by people who occupy parts of the town. I think that's just craziness, and it's incendiary, and it gets people killed for no particularly good reason. And I'm not really impressed by people shouting slogans or coming up with conclusionary statements that are absurd if you don't know why they're saying that. But I do have the ability and the willingness now to listen at a deeper level, not to the rhetoric, but to what's being said. And I don't have a solution. I don't have a solution to propose. What I know is there's a great, horrible truth that's being expressed very poorly by Black Lives Matters leadership and the politicians in support of it, very poorly. If they would trust people to have the patience to listen to the parts of the truth that will make sense to folks, even if they're very much opposed to the conclusions of Black Lives Matters, I think we could get to a better place. That's graceful listening. And here's the deal. There's no graceful listening happening at the level of leadership anywhere that I can discern. What is happening is rhetoric that's divisive and meant to cause people to hate more the other side. And that's craziness. As Christians, whether we are able to come up with perfect solutions or not, we owe it to our covenant with Jesus Christ to listen gracefully and to have the attitude, I bet there's something there, right? I may not agree with the reaction to the horrors of the Jim Crow South and the Red Line laws. I may not agree with the proposals of Black Lives Matters, but I do know now, because I opened my mind and my heart and my eyes and tried to hear what was being said by people that I didn't understand. I do know that there is a lot of validity in the things that they are saying about the situation that we're in now, because the situation we're in now is a product of a situation that we have been in and that was intentionally abusive towards Blacks. So I'm going to wait for somebody smarter than myself to come up with a solution that seems realistic and seems confessional and sacrificial on the part of those who have gained from those systems and sets the bar fairly for new opportunity for Blacks in our country. Until then, I'm going to keep a graceful heart, and I'm going to try to do my part to suggest everybody should really listen more closely to the depth of what's being said. There's happy thoughts applied, graceful thinking, graceful research, the willingness to listen at a deeper level than other leadership help us. You may like it, you may not like it. If you can be a gentle and graceful opponent, please email me at pastorstevevumc@gmail.com. If you think this is sheer genius, please email me at the same place, because I like to hear that. If you're respectful in whatever you might say back, I'd be happy to address that, sometimes in happy thoughts, sometimes through the email. I invite the conversation. I don't think it's going to be harmful for anybody, because this conversation today and the conversation I've been having inside for a long time now is based on following what Jesus actually said to his followers, which is, you should treat others as you want to be treated. And I sure want to be listened to even when I'm really amped up. I want somebody to love me enough to hear what it is that causes that kind of painful reaction in me. And I am trying to give that same grace to other folks. So I hope you have a great week. I do hope that you're able to stay cool. I hope that you go to church or synagogue or go and worship, because I think when we get closer to our Creator, it's just better for everybody. And I do hope that you will be, if you are a Christian, a New Testament Christian. Center in on what Jesus said. Don't be paying attention to folks who lost their grace a long time ago. God bless. Have a good week, and I'll pick it up again next week.